This is an extract from the Leader Coronavirus Daily podcast by the Evening Standard and hosted by me, David Marsland. To hear the whole thing, search for it on your podcast provider. A year after being introduced to Parliament by Theresa May's government, the Domestic Abuse Bill is on its way to the Lords. Some have hailed it as a landmark. It introduces the first legal definition of the crime, protects children who witness it, and stops killers using rough sex as a defence. But even some supporters of the legislation say there's a gaping hole in it. It doesn't allow access to public funds or shelter support for migrant women with an insecure status. Labour's Jess Phillips is fighting for an amendment, saying to truly be a landmark, the law must include all women. She spoke to the Evening Standard's Matilda Mallinson.
Would you just first outline how the current system fails to protect migrant women?
It's quite complicated, but basically, if you have come to this country on any variety of visas, from coming here to get married or coming here to work, to be a student, or even on a tourist visa, you usually will have a condition that is no recourse to public funds, meaning you can't access the benefits system. What that means in cases of domestic abuse is currently, because you have no recourse to public funds, you would not be able to access refuge accommodation as a rule. In the vast majority of cases, what will be told to you if you were to go forward at that stage to your local council, to the police, even to a local women's refuge, is I'm afraid that we cannot house you because you have no recourse to public funds. Just me, as a British-born white woman who speaks English, it would be really hard for me to come forward to services, because I will have been told that no one will believe me. I will have been told that nothing will happen. I will have been told that I'm worthless and that I deserved it. Then add in that your perpetrator, who in most of the cases I deal with is a British citizen, saying, if you go forward, you'll be deported. I'll keep the kids, or you'll lose your job. You would think, oh, well, I've got to just keep my head down. I've got to keep quiet. I'm not going to come forward. And so we have to sing from the rooftops as policymakers and support providers that people should come forward. But unfortunately, what happens in lots of cases is that when those people come forward, one of two things can happen is, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do for you tonight. There's nowhere we can accommodate you. You're going to have to either go back to where you were staying, which is likely with a violent perpetrator, or in the worst cases, we've seen how people have had their immigration status reported to the Home Office. So I had a constituent who had a threat to kill by her ex-husband, and she was going through the immigration process completely and utterly legally. When the threat to kill came against her, she called the police and she ended up in Yarlswood Detention Centre. And that's not like one harrowing case. There are lots of cases like that. And so the message, you should come forward, you will be safer, is completely damned by that sort of practice.
So what's the goal? Is the goal here an amendment to the bill?
We've been incredibly successful throughout the process of the Domestic Abuse Bill of getting the government to listen to campaigns, whether it's about tenancies, whether it's about providing sustainable refuge accommodation funding, whether it's been about putting children on the face of the bill. The government have met us in the middle and listened to campaigns, both cross-party campaigns and national campaigns by campaigning organisations. The stumbling block on this one, I cannot help but think, is that it's because it's about immigration. It seems ideological rather than steeped in reality. And that is a real shame, because what we're talking about is not vast swathes of people, or we're talking about people who live and work legally in this country, or have come here because of being in danger and have found themselves in a dangerous situation again. And we want to just be able to make sure that they can be helped.
What's the likelihood of this passing?
The government is going to run a pilot that they're putting £1.5 million into to see if they can fill the gap and create a funding model for these groups of people. However, that £1.5 million is based on absolutely no data whatsoever. And when I asked what happens if that money runs out within the first 6 months of the pilot, do we then just turn all the other victims who come forward away? I simply don't have the answers to those questions. And so all we are asking is for the government, for just 1 year of the pilot, to ease the no recourse to public funds rules just for victims of domestic violence. And it's not like anyone could just come forward and say, well, I'm a victim of domestic violence. There is a burden of proof that we've associated with that amendment that follows the same proof that any victim has to bring forward if they want to claim legal aid. It's the government standard.
And is there anything the public can do?
We have a petition on my website, which is jessphillips.net, and people can sign up to it. It's called No Victim Left Behind, and it's to make sure that whoever you are, wherever you come from, wherever you work, no matter what your circumstances, if you're being abused, then we think that the government and the state and us as a society should help you.
Search for the Leader Coronavirus Daily on any podcast provider to hear more from the podcast.